Supernatural, production designer for Supernatural, every hotel room you loved, every lair that scared you, every church you wish you could visit. He built them all, he conceived them all, and he also directed several episodes of the show. It brings me great joy to introduce to you Mr. Jerry Wanek.
Hello, Nashville. Really happy to be here, and I want to thank everybody for coming because, as you've heard many times during this weekend, without you, none of us would be up here. So, first of all, thank you.
And also, I was going to say this in my intro, but for any of you, how many of you have the book? Jerry made that book. I mean, not only did Jerry, obviously the book is featuring Jerry's work. It's all the beautiful sets he created over 15 years of television. But also Jerry's the reason why you have that book. Is Jerry he created it, and then he had to get Warner Brothers to allow people who weren't on the show to have access to it. So, round of applause for this man for allowing you guys to have his art on display. I'm going to start with a question for Jerry. And I also want to tell you something that I've told Jerry many times. Jerry, when I started directing the show, Jerry and he became my greatest ally and mentor. And we became great friends. And I knew him as an actor, but when you're acting in the show, unless you're directing us, we don't get to know you that well. You know what I mean? Because you're up getting ready for the next show. And so it wasn't until I started directing that I got to know Jerry super well. But for the time I was an actor, and I've told Jerry this before, I was scared shitless of Jerry. He was so intimidating, because he would come down, he was such a badass, and he built all these sets that were so awesome, and he'd come down and like point at crap, and people would jump and start painting, and whatever he was doing, I didn't understand it, it frightened me, and he was a stoic symbol of authority who would come down there. I now know that he's a hilarious man and easygoing, but I didn't know it at the time, and I remember we finally got to know him as a partner in the process of prepping episodes. I'm like, wow, what a veneer. I totally thought you were a stern taskmaster. Tell me about how you got involved in Supernatural. How did this world open up to you?
First of all, thank you for those kind words, Richard, and I'll never forget the night. We were out having beers. It was early in one of your episodes you were prepping. And, we were having fun, and he looked over at me and he went, you know what? You're kind of fun. You're not mean at all. I'm like, really? Thank you. But I don't know, I guess I come off that way.
I think it was more like, it's just that you were so good in your role in the show. And look, when you're an actor and somebody is an executive producer, there's a gap. There's a hierarchy, an order of march, if you will. So I didn't deal a lot with the EPs when I was a lowly actor. So it was a mystique to you,
But one of the things where the more serious side comes in is, we're doing this show for you, right? And we just don't want to disappoint because we had set a very high bar. And the last thing we want to do is have somebody get disinterested in our show because one of the sets just sucked. Because if we don't tell the story in a way that is true to, our set's not true to the story, you're going to go like, what are you doing? What is that doing there? So it takes a lot, because there's a lot of detail to keep up with it. And as you know, we did some pretty quirky stuff. We did 173 motel rooms without ever repeating. And thank you. But within those motel rooms, as much as we like to push the look, there was nothing in there that was out of place. Once we picked a theme, be it the disco motel, which was fun as hell, to some of our more mid-century looks, then everything in it, from the place cards to the fire exit on the back of the door. I remember I had this great graphic artist named Leanne Lazicek, and she just has a great sense of humor. I mean, all my graphic department were great, as well as the rest of my crew, but she particularly had a very, like, kind of great sense of humor. So once we did the disco motel, she goes, we gotta have a diagram for the steps on how to dance the shuffle. And unless you were around during that time, that was a huge dance craze. And so that became part of the disco motel. And there's many, many other things from, you know, the room keys, the shape of the room keys. Like the Forest Inn had room keys that were in the shape of, you know, a pine tree. And
that's a commitment to detail, because you know that somewhere, for 10 fans that don't notice it, one does. You know what I mean? And they're going to look at it, and that detail matters, because when they pause the high-def television and zoom in, what they're seeing is all authentic to what that room should be, and that time period in that region.
And during, you know, like, the first couple of years, there wasn't that much sort of social media, but then all of a sudden there's Hulu, and all of a sudden we're on every day, everywhere. And then people really start picking it apart, because now they just take the episodes, they're not watching it on network television, they can freeze frame, and they can zoom in, and they're going, hey, is that an Easter egg? And a lot of times we would put little bits in there just to foreshadow what was going on, or maybe it was a red herring from another episode. But we did that constantly just because it was a challenge for us. But we also wanted to keep you guys engaged, because, you know, you are very, very loyal fans, probably the most loyal fans in the history of television, period.
Yeah, I think you are. It's pretty good.
So, I mean, the other thing that opened my eyes is when I started, thankfully, Rob and Richard invited me to do their podcast. And you get some questions, and things that come up on that are like really about minutia of what you guys saw or what you guys felt. And that's all important feedback. You know, that the most important thing we can do is, if I design a set for Richard, I remember the one when we were doing the Tarantino thing when you guys came out of the elevator.
Yeah.
And I knew what you wanted. And, you know, it definitely affected the way you three guys walked down that hall, because the presence of that hallway was such that that was badass.
Yeah,
So
it was
when
awesome.
you guys strut down it, you know, your attitude matched the texture of the walls and the length of the hallway.
No, it was great. You would talk to Jerry about shot plan. Nothing happened by accident. He was involved in the design of, I can speak for myself as a director. Jerry and I would be on the phone or on email talking about a plan before I flew to Vancouver. Like, he would read it and go, especially after I'd done several, Jerry knew how I thought. So he'd go, I bet Rich is going to want to blah, blah, blah. And he was always right, because he knew how I like to move camera. And so he would free up, and he knew the same thing about Phil Segresha, about Bob Singer. So his sets would start to reflect the flavor of the director who was going to be up there doing it, so that you could be super creative within a space that made sense. You know, it seemed logically like it was what it was, but it also freed up the filmmaker to make film. By the way, Rob Bennett has joined us.
Hello, sir. Thank you.
The winner of the Richard Spade Lookalike Contest.
I didn't want to miss this. So.
Well, we have some questions. I think we should
great.
dive in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Why don't we start with this young lady right there?
Hi, I'm Kira. Jerry, thank you so much for being here. This is an absolute treat.
Thank you.
I was wondering, there's a couple of episodes, like I'm thinking of changing channels, or the one where Dean gets sent back in time and Sam has to, the time person, someone help me. Yeah, thank you, Chronos. So the rooms are the same, but essentially they've been dirty, right? Or the paint has changed. How do you do that in concepts of filming? Is it we're filming this type room for the first couple days and then we're gonna go dirty it up and go to the next part, or Is it completely different sets? How do you design that? How do you work that out?
That's a great question. On that particular, let's say, changing channels, especially in the motel room, where one was very pristine and the other one was, very lifted, we actually built two side by side that were a mirror of each other. So that way, because, when we're doing our show, we have 8 days to come through a lot of pages, a lot of sets, and you just don't have time to oh yeah, those two actors, they can come back 3 days from now and we'll change the sentiment. So you have to come up with creative ways on how to keep the schedule flowing, keeping the actors happy, and keeping the continuity. Because if you're in the middle of, let's say, that particular episode, and Jensen's about to take a bite of this monster sandwich, and then he has to change over to this other motel room. You don't want to interrupt his performance by 3 days or 2 days or 3 hours. So a lot of times, because we've done that for many episodes where there was a slight change of time. So what we would usually do is we would build a set, we would paint it to its most down and dirty aspect, and then we would put what they call tough back, which is another word for sandblast paper, and then we would apply that over the aged walls, and then put a nice wallpaper, a nice painting treatment. So we could basically, after we did one scene, by the time the actors went in and got a wardrobe change or whatever the show called for, we would just rip off these big sheets, and underneath it, you had a very different looking, aged set. So there's, but good question. And
Great question, great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you so
That's
much.
what we
That's
did.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, over here.
Hi. Thanks so much for being here. This is so cool. Wanted to ask you what your references and your ideas and came about for the Men of Letters bunker, and
Ooh.
how you went about deciding it was going to be so many stories and so many rooms.
Interesting question. So, yeah, birth of that set. Because let me ask you a preamble question. Is that the first standing set Supernatural had?
Yeah, that's the first real standing set. I mean, Bobby's was a bit, right? Because
Right.
we were in on a Bobby's a bit, but there was never enough page count to really make it count as a standing set. Because usually, if you have a standing set, you want to be in at least a day or two an episode.
A standing set is a set you never tear down. It's the
Yeah.
Cheers bar.
Yeah.
It's the place that the characters are going to live repeatedly throughout the life of the show, so it doesn't get messed with.
You had Harvell's season 2, right?
Yeah.
That was the same set for one season.
Yes, but it's funny because there were limitations to Harvell's as far as the writers found it a little challenging to write, a lot of scenes to this bar. So I mean, it's one of my favorite sets. I love that set, and the boys love the set, but we just couldn't work it into enough episodes to make it worthwhile. So then we burned it down.
Right.
So, Men of Letters, the origin story for you for Men of Letters.
So the Men of Letters, finally, I guess with season 7, everybody said, okay, we're going to do the Men of Letters. And they gave me a little bit of backstory, and Adam, the writer, of course, wrote, it's Hitler's bunker. And I'm going, Hitler's bunker? And I've done that before because it's one of those things where everybody thinks of something that is really cool and really evil and really mysterious. It's not. It's literally concrete walls, and it's not interesting at all. And I said, okay, let's open this up a little bit because we're going to shoot in there once, twice, maybe 3 times. No other director is going to want to shoot in it because there's nothing visually interesting, and we're just going to tear it down. So, and Phil Scarisha, who's really visual, he had a lot of input, and he started sending me some really magnificent research libraries and things. And then I got to thinking of the time period when the Men of Letters actually came into an existence, and it kind of matched up perfectly with the WPA movement, where the government built a lot of really cool museums, libraries, public utilities, and so we kind of traced the people that were the initiators of the men of letters to be like the Freemasons. So Freemasons were men of means. They were the heads of industry, of science, of medicine. They were all very learned people. And so that opened up this whole other thing about what we could actually put into the men of letters. And so we started off, we definitely wanted a really cool library because instead of the boys just going to Dad's journal, we needed something more. That worked for us incredibly well, but we needed more depth, especially now that we're getting into angels and more folklore and theology and what have you. So we started with the big library, but then we had to have like the war room. So, and I liked multi-levels, but going back to the original concept of the WPA movement, many of those buildings were done in Art Deco. And if you're a designer, Art Deco is sort of, I like to refer to it as a sucker punch. It's gonna look good. It's gonna look so good that if you use it too often, you're gonna be sick of it, and so will your audience. So I really hadn't used it up to that point at all in any of the first 7 seasons. So I thought, okay, this is an opportunity. Let's do this. And so then John Marcinek and Robert Leader and myself and everybody else in the art department just started throwing out ideas because, as Richard Marr will tell you, I never had an office. I have a bullpen. And whoever's working with me, I want to know what they're talking about. I want to know what they're thinking. I want to know what how they're approaching this. So we all sat down and came up with a design. I said, it's got to be bigger. We've got to make this bigger because we're gonna get bored with it. So finally we landed on, a very big set, and it was more than double the budget that they wanted to spend on it. But I said, trust me. Famous words in Hollywood, trust me. I said, if we do this right, it's going to be around for a few years, and that will more than pay for itself.
Yeah, you save the money in the long run by doing it right the first time.
Yes.
Pretty epic set, too.
Thank you. It was a lot of, big effort on everybody in the art, construction, set deck. Everybody had a big hand in it. But one of the things we also did, and it was part of the original concept, was I said, all the hallways and all the surfaces have to match in some way. Because I know down the road, there's going to be other things they're going to write to, and we need to connect that in an organic way. So like when we go out the war room and we go down that tile hallway, and we get to the dorm part, we have Jensen's room on the right, and then on the left across from him is Sam's room. Well, we really only use one room. And we would just switch the doors around and turn the camera from the other direction. So you thought we were going into the other side of the hallway, but we just redressed the one room.
Yeah.
It's
Ridiculous. I know. It's hilarious. One of my favorite things is that, like anything, it's a set. It's like your own home. And you're like, oh, we need a place to put a towel. So now we have a towel rack. When I was directing Just My Imagination, Sam was supposed to walk into the kitchen and turn on the lights. And we walked, that's how it's instructed in the script, and that's kind of made sense in the story, because he's going to meet Sully. And he walks in, and I was down there prepping, and I'm like, there's no light switch. There's no light switch in this building, in this room. And so like Dave Karp was like, where do you want a light switch? I'm like, right there. And he's like, there, you get a light switch. And so if you watch Supernatural, the kitchen has no light switch until Just My Imagination, and suddenly, boom, there's a light switch. You make it work for you when you need it.
Now, did you always know what the Men of Letters were all the hallways? Like, did you build the kitchen after the fact?
Yeah, they'll get added
or did you
on.
know that there was always going to be a kitchen and always be the bedrooms and all that?
Actually, the kitchen and the hallway to the dorm, that was part of the original design. Because, I think the first script had a little scene in the kitchen. So I remember taking the back off the refrigerator, doing the classic refrigerator shot, things like that. But that was it. So then when later on when we had a big electronics room, we had a boiler room, we had Dean's man cave, we had a hospital. Those were all reworked. And what we do is we would just add another piece of hallway, and you make a right turn, and all of a sudden there might be a couple of stairs, and now we're into the hospital.
Yeah.
And
It's funny, as a guest actor, you build on, so I'll have one season, I'll come in again the next season, and it's kind of changed, and you go onto the set, and like, yeah, they're just right there, like, okay, and I go, oh, geez, and then you're in a room you've never seen before, you're like, where's everybody? I don't even know already. It's so easy to get lost in that set.
Great question. Thank you very much. Over here.
Okay, well, thank you for all of your work. I really love it. So,
you're welcome.
okay, well, my question, in the last season, sadly, the last season, season 15, I really like how sometimes sets can give you some idea about what's going on internally with the characters. For the finale and the last season, can you talk about what kinds of choices were made in the production design for like the bunker and the places where they live that maybe show what the characters are feeling?
Thank you. That's a great question, but it's a much bigger question than you'll ever know. Because the original finale was us building a beautiful ballroom, a little smaller than this, but not much, and it was going to be like, you know, a House of Blues ballroom. And Kansas was on their way up to Vancouver to be in the final episode. And in this grand ballroom that we were building, we had it like 3/4 of the way built. We would find a lot of people that had passed on because this was heaven. So we had the opportunity to bring back all these wonderful actors and characters that, you know, we had lost during the 15 years. But then COVID stepped in and they couldn't get across the border. So now all of a sudden, you know, Andrew and Bob and everybody are just scrambling to, you know, rewrite the episode. And I think they did an incredible job. There was so much heart in that last episode. And take it for somebody who was there on the bridge weeping, you know, during that last scene. That was just it was a wonderful but very sad day, you know, because you're saying bye to this group, this family that you've hung out with for 15 years. And, but the choices, I mean, they're like all the choices we make during the run of the show. And as the designer, the first thing you want to do is tell the story. And that's, you know, Bob Singer. I mean, like when Richard first started directing, when I directed, you know, you're there like a deer in the headlights. He goes, just tell the story. And the same thing goes for when you're doing a set. The most important thing is to create that feeling that you got when you watched it, then we did our job right. Because that's really what it's about. And we touched on that briefly before. When, you know, either of these guys come to me or the boys come to me and say, you know, that was a great set. You know, it's easy for me to get into that character because everywhere I looked was what that actor should have been feeling. I mean, I loved the set we created for Rob. It was patterned after a famous nightclub in New York during the 60s.
Amazing.
You know, but it was simple. But, you know, the American flag with the little stool and the spotlight.
The Don't Call Me Shirley set.
Yeah.
Did you feel like, because I never saw the set, Rob, did you feel like you were like in the bar?
It felt like that, and it felt like I was on a Broadway show. Like it was a set worthy of a one-act play, like to me, you know, because it really is a scene between these two characters.
Right.
And yeah, no, it was amazing, and the lighting. It did feel like you were in one of those, you know, the clubs in New York, you know.
Do you remember the alternate universe church? That they with the Gabriel fresco on the wall, like
Oh, yeah.
where we had, and that thing was the most realistic church.
Yeah.
You could not believe you were not inside a church when you were in that building. It was a 360-degree set. I would stay in there during breaks. When people would break for lunch. I'm just sitting there thinking about the rest of the day's work and just going, no one would believe that I'm on a soundstage. It was so, and that helps everybody. It doesn't just help it helps the actors. It helps the directors. It helps the gaffers, and it helps Serge light it. because like it just it's like putting on the right costume for your
Yeah.
for your character. It's
Yep.
just it's part of the universe, and if the universe feels real, everything gets elevated.
Yep.
And a good barometer of that, as far as if you've done a great job, is, I have an ego, I'm an artist. So I look at these sets, especially the one Richard's talking about. We've done many churches, but one of my favorite one was the one where we had the iron.
Yeah, Pellegrino hanging. in
Pellegrino,
there.
because we could see past Christ on the cross through these slats, and you see Satan just beyond it. But you did a good set, because look, everybody on our crew is a seasoned veteran, and when they walk in and they go for their iPhones and start clicking, like, wow, this is a cool set, because they're the hardest guys to please, because they see this stuff every day.
Right.
And so I usually, because I have to open every set, like if it's a big set, whether people like it or they don't like it, I'm going to be there to take the hit, because I can change it. If it has to be, if it's really, unshootable or something's wrong, I want to know about it.
And what Jerry means by open the set is the first day, the first moment that every crew member enters that set, Jerry's standing there waiting for them.
Yeah.
So when they arrive, director, producers, anybody who's on that set, Jerry's there to walk them through it and then field questions as they sort of go through the paces of getting ready to shoot. That's on the day of shooting. So it's the clock's already ticking and it's a big day.
So I basically treat that as an art opening, because, that's the background I come from, and to me it's like a big installation piece that people actually live in, work in, and tell stories. So if the response is good, then it was a successful opening. But, yeah.
Great, awesome. Over here.
Hi. I wanted to ask about in season 12, there's a series of episodes that have a whole rotation of different diners. There's like 5 or 6 of them across a bunch of episodes. One which is in Richard's talking in the middle of the U with the big.
Oh yeah, when we did the circle around the table like Tarantino.
Yep.
You built that one, yeah.
Yep. And there's several others in the episodes before and after that one that have, you can see little elements of each one that are the same. Like there's a green and white checked floor that shows up in a few of them, and 2 of them have kind of the same curved piece behind where the espresso machine is and whatnot. I was curious how often you can take advantage of situations like that where you have to build something similar kind of close together and use something you kind of already built and tweak it to be something totally different for another episode, or how you have to start all over again.
That's a great question, and it makes me mad that we didn't change it enough to fool you. So
You
there.
can't fool anybody.
I know.
They watch it too closely, buddy.
Exactly. As long as it doesn't take you out of the story. Diners, there are a lot of same, pieces, but we didn't do that often. At some point, depending on if we only have a short scene, or we've used up all our money building other sets, then you have to rework a set. So it's really, and it really depends on the story again. If, the geography and the floor plan of the last diner worked, then you can use some elements. If it's a totally different tone, you're moving on, you're building a different diner. But I use that floor a lot because, and it wasn't always a repeat, and a lot of times there's a subtle color change, but I like to keep my tone on tone. I'm not a big contrast guy. Anyway, long-winded answer for what we do is we use those floors because they're really cheap to put down, and they're also really smooth, because in all of our sets, and not a lot of designers and construction department do this, we made all our floors so you could dolly on the floor. And when I'm talking about dolly, it's a this big contraption that you put the camera on, so you keep things very smooth when you're doing a moving shot. So the only other way to get a smooth shot is to lay dolly track. Well, dolly track is very limited, is it's a straight run or it's a little bit of a curve. So if you make the floor totally smooth, there's no bumps, now you can take that dolly and move it anywhere you want, back it up, you know, raise it up. You can do whatever you want and not have to worry about running out of space, running out of track. So we did use those floors a lot, but I know the set you're talking about that we did, you know, several times that we, you know, reconfigured.
Good eye.
Good eye, exactly. That's what I meant by keeping us on our toes.
The main thing too is hotel rooms. You had to recreate over and over and
He
over
was
again.
saying when he started, he did 137.
173.
133 original hotel rooms. That's baffling.
But I talked to you guys on your podcast. So in year one, this young guy from Warner Brothers had this brilliant idea. He said, "Hey, I'm working out a deal with Motel 6 because there's Motel 6s everywhere. So every time the boys go to a town, they'll be in a Motel 6." And I said, "Great, now find another designer," because that is the best way for us to tell location, region, state, because there's always little Easter eggs in the motels that kind of tell you where you are.
Yeah, no offense to Motel 6, but that would have been boring as heck.
And you would have had somebody from Motel 6 on set every day we shot at them to make sure the water glasses were in the right place. You know, that's a big can of worms, and
Yeah.
that would have happened. But a lot of times when you read the script and we find out where it's from, we immediately, I had such a great department, you know, Susie and all these people that did this wonderful research. And I just said, find something unique about that area. And sometimes it was the state tree or the state bird or, you know, I mean, it could be any number of things. And I just, okay, I don't like that, but give me something else. And then we would decide, okay, you know, this one was about tobacco. So instead of just doing a warehouse, we're going to make it a kiln for tobacco, because that's a lot more interesting. Same thing when we were like in Kentucky and we did the big distillery, because at some point, and it was a blessing and a curse, the writers got so comfortable with the work we were doing, they would write in the script, "Just let Jerry do something cool." And I'm like, thank you, but now what? And but we did okay, you know.
Yeah.
We always seem to come up with something, because it's always a lot easier designing a space if it has a history. Now, if you just say abandoned warehouse, which was in probably 100 scripts, okay, but what was it before it was an abandoned warehouse? What did they do there? And so we would come up with backstories just to have certain elements to change it up and keep it interesting.
All right, you young lady over there.
Hi Jerry, my name is
Hi.
Allison. I'm so excited that you're here. Your work on the show is amazing, and really glad you're here. And I was wondering, I know that there was a lot of thought put into the beer bottle brands used on the show and the kind of resonance for different brands at different moments. And I was curious if there was another prop that you could point to that had kind of a similar thematic resonance for different scenes.
Well, that's a great question. I don't know if you know the story about the beer brand, the Margie Kugels. That, you know, for those who don't know, that's named after my mother. And her picture's actually on the neck of the bottle. But her real name, her maiden name was Margie Kugel. So there's a famous beer in Wisconsin called
Leinenkugel.
Leinenkugel. Very popular beer. And so I had Leanne, my graphic artist, research the Leinenkugel label and find out how we can just change it enough to turn it into Margie Kugels. And we'd like to do that with a lot of stuff. I mean, like, for Richard, we did a sub shop with his 3 sons.
Yeah.
You know.
There's a couple episodes that have 3 Amigos sub sandwiches,
Yeah.
and then it has Steve, Fletch, and Frank, all 3 of their names on the window.
Yeah, and the reason doing that is, look, you gotta name it something. So why not, you know, give somebody else a little joy out of it, right? And a lot of times we'd ask the director, sometimes we'd ask crew, sometimes the fans gave us ideas. But I'm trying to think of other things that were a repeat.
Well, I know.
Because
So
they drank a lot.
Yeah, let's think about recurring. Like, was there recurring bourbon, or like in the whiskey world, was there something that was a return to in that?
There was, one of them was Levinsky's, who was guy from my hometown of Wisconsin that he was a garbage collector. But he was a really good guy, and, you know, he liked brandy and bourbon, and,
Lebinsky's a great name.
you know, yeah, it's a nice Polish name from back in Wisconsin, and so, yeah, and then there was a couple that I can't quite remember, but, you know, that some of the characters, I think Bobby had his own brand that he
Right.
liked, and things like that.
It's a fun thing to watch for as you rewatch the episodes to see
Sure.
what's what. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Over here.
Over here.
Hi, so I'm still in college and I'm just trying to figure out my major. I've thought about set design. What advice do you have for me to figure out if that's something I'm like?
Do it.
There you go.
You know, and here's the thing that I've changed my thoughts on radically in the last, well, actually just in the last year. To me, the antichrist of design and art is AI. And it's even worse for, you know, our thespian friends since Tilly Norwood came on. But,
God.
you know, the more I look at it and how good it's getting, it's not going to replace, you know, what you're doing, but you better well get to know it in a real personal way, because if you don't use it, you will be left behind. You just have to embrace it, because it does open up a lot of options. I wish if I had a screen, I'd show you. A couple years ago, when it first started happening, I asked ChatGPT to design an abandoned cabin in the forest designed by Jerry Wanek. And it looked like a Hallmark card, but it wasn't terrible. And then, like, when I'm interviewing and showing people, I have the cabin we did for the first episode of season 12 that later ended up on Yellow Jackets. That was their cabin. Because,
Oh, wow.
when I build a set, and I did this back when I did Dark Angel, I built this whole back lot. And after the show was over, they said, well, you're going to tear it down. I said, why? Well, somebody's going to copy your art. Somebody's going to use your street. And I said, what a nice thing. What a compliment. If they think that it's good enough to shoot their show on. Because Vancouver doesn't have a lot of resources like that. Now they're getting better. They're getting a couple of things. But at the time, there was no cabin in the woods. And I mean, I had shot up there for over 10 years, well, closer to 15, by the time we built that cabin. And it was Bob Singer's episode, and I said, Bob, I'm not even gonna waste your time showing you cabins that aren't in the woods or that they're too small to shoot. I said, let's go find a cool place to build it, and we're gonna build it. And the same thing happened with the house we did for when we met Calvert.
Oh, Al, it's Calvert?
Al, yeah.
Al.
Jack.
So this Jack, the same, you know, we needed this kind of idyllic place where the birthing was going to take place and all this. It was really dramatic, but it also had to have some wonderment and be beautiful. And I spent, you know, literally 2 weeks looking at a bunch of stuff that didn't work. And again, it was Bob Singer's episode, which helps because Bob, as the showrunner, also controls a lot of the money. So I said, hey Bob, I hope you don't mind, but I found a really cool place to build the set, but we're gonna build the set. And he said, great, because that way we can do the interiors back on stage, and it just makes it a lot, everybody's life gets much easier when you can do that.
If you have a passion for this, you should do it.
Yeah.
If Jerry's work doesn't inspire you, or his conversations don't inspire you, I'd be shocked. So, pursue your dreams.
Thank you so much.
I have a question for you, Jerry. You have work here. What are these?
Well, you can take the boy off of Supernatural, but you can't take the supernatural out of the boy. So I've been doing some original art pieces of sets that I really liked. You know, this is Harvell's, you know, and then this is the restaurant where we met the vampire, Benny. And this is the house that we built in Squamish.
Amazing.
But it's just for me, I needed a release, and I wasn't ready to let go of what we did for 15 years of our lives. And what I'm gonna do, like I did with the books, eventually, I have, you know, probably about 20 of these now. and I'm going to scan them and then make prints and then make them available to all of you.
If, we can do this all day. We can do this all day and talk to Jerry because it's such a rare treat. For any of you who want to continue your conversation with Jerry, having more questions, Jerry is going to be doing the film school with me where I sit quietly by and Jerry answers your questions. So if you want any more conversation with Jerry, please join us for film school later today. If you see him in the hallway, say hi. I bet he'll sign your book for you if you have it with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and pleasure.
Jerry Wanek.
Jerry Wanek here.